Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Metal, and I'm here today with my friend and long-term mentor, Barry Habib. Barry is a true American entrepreneur. He's an Amazon #1 best-selling author, frequent media expert for CNBC, Fox, NBC News, Bloomberg, and many others. Barry is the CEO and founder of MBS Highway and has been named as the top real estate forecaster by Zillow and Pulsenomics as a 2-time recipient of the coveted Crystal Ball Award, which came in very useful for my business last year, I might add. Thank you, Barry. And in his spare time, Barry's taken up the entertainment business as lead producer and managing partner for Rock of Ages, one of the longest running shows in Broadway history, and produces Chris Angel's Mind Freak at Planet Hollywood. Barry, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Really great to be here with you, Josh. I appreciate spending time with you, my friend.
Ditto. Hey, and I'm going to start by sharing a story with you that you probably are unaware of. When the mortgage crisis hit, I was generating loans out of Utah, and we hit our trough about 2 years after the coasts. So some areas were starting to recover when we were really getting hit hard. And you did a seminar, you did an event in Las Vegas where I was at my rock bottom in my professional career. I'd gone from producing over 350 loans in a year to having 2 loans in the pipeline. My wife and my new wife and my mom and I had started buying investment properties, and we had 3 properties under renovation at the same time, very little liquidity. And I literally at that event thought, I'm going to lose my investments. I'm going to lose my wife. I'm going to lose my business. I am destroyed. And I'll never forget going down to that event and looking around me and seeing all of the people that, in spite of this recession, had figured out ways that they were overcoming these challenges and they were making it. And it was literally at that event where I decided, hey, if they can do it, why not me? Why can't I find a way to get out of this hole that I feel I'm in? So I wanted to pay you a really big thank you and debt of gratitude that I don't think I've ever told you before.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, you did it.
Yeah, thank you. You're touching people all over the place, man. So just wanted to give you a big high five for that. So Barry, let's get in, man. You recently wrote a book, which was absolutely fantastic. The title of the book is Money in the Streets. And, I have followed you throughout your incredible career. But I thought it would just be great for you to kick us off and tell us a little bit about your childhood and more importantly, how you cultivated this idea that opportunity is literally everywhere and that there's money in the streets.
Well, you and I both, I think, come from very modest backgrounds, very similar backgrounds where it was not easy. So we understand what it's like to be in these difficult positions. And that's why I think that both you and I have a heart and a desire to want to help others, because we can really empathize. We know what it feels like.
Yes.
And my parents, who were immigrants, when they came here to the US, like so many immigrants, they hear about the riches of America and that America is so wealthy and so rich that there's streets are lined with gold, or there's money in the streets. And all you got to do is pick it up. And when I was a young boy, so when I was born, my parents were a lot older. I was fortunate enough, Josh, that I was born right after I was conceived, actually right before birth control was made available, and I was also right before abortions were made legal. So I kind of threaded the needle there, and my parents were struggling. They really had very little money. It was very difficult for them. And as I was growing up, I remember my mom telling me stories about, people thought America was so wealthy that there was money in the streets. And she would tell me the story that they believed that there was money in the streets. And she would say so in a way that was kind of funny, but it was also sad. And as I discovered through the opportunities that are all around us here, and just ways to find them and ways to look for them, that there really is money in the streets. You have to just be able to find and see the opportunities, and there's a way to learn how to do that. and then do good with those opportunities. And I remember talking with my mom before she passed and saying that, Mom, you were right. There really is money in the streets. You just have to be able to see it and pick it up and then do good with it. But there really is money in the streets.
Yeah, I'm doing this meditation recently, Barry, and it's by Dr. Joe Dispenza, which I can't recommend highly enough to anybody who wants to experiment with meditation. And it's the generating abundance meditation. And Joe talks a lot in that meditation around getting yourself into an energetic space where you feel abundant, where you feel like when the opportunity, when the money in the street presents itself, you will be ready to add value to whatever that opportunity is. And you'll be able to recognize it and take advantage of it. And he talks a lot about it's hard to actually actualize and create abundance if you're coming from a place of lack. And so I wonder, in your evolution, because I remember in your book, you talked about having that conversation with your mom where you're like, hey, there actually is money in the streets. And so as you transition from hearing it to believing it, was there some sort of a moment where you connected those dots and went, hey, if I'm tenacious, if I'm prepared, if I'm energetic, that's how I create and see the money in the streets?
The amount of money in your bank account really is immaterial, isn't it? Because the richest person on earth and someone who's pretty uh, pretty poor by comparison financially, they're both going to feel the same when they both laugh. They're both going to feel the same when they experience joy. So you can put yourself in a beautiful mindset. And this is something, I've become friends with Tony Robbins. And one of the lessons that he taught me was that he said, we're oftentimes going to get upset or disappointed at things. And we're going to get, because we're human, pissed. And, somebody's going to invariably do something, cut you off or this or that, right? Well, when that occurs, we're humans. So give yourself a brief period of time. He likes to say, 90 seconds for him. I'm not as good as him. It might take me 5 minutes, but let that happen. But then bring yourself back to the beautiful mindset, because whatever that situation was, it's not worth stealing your joy.
That's right.
And you only have so much time, but not just your joy, but the joy that you could bring to others by having that beautiful mindset. It's very important that we don't let that weigh on us too much. Okay, so we're human. Get upset. Stop it. Come back to a beautiful mindset, because that's everything. That's what allows you to achieve things. And one of the ways that helps me achieve that every day is, I truly begin the day every day with gratitude. I say out loud all the things that I'm, so blessed and fortunate for, and it just kind of centers you and refocuses you, because throughout the day we're going to have things that can give you heartburn, right? So if you start off by listening and saying and repeating all of these things that remain in the forefront of your mind, so you don't take them for granted as much. How truly lucky we are and how blessed we are. You're able to weather those unpleasant times that are going to occur throughout the day a little bit easier, or to get over them a little bit more rapidly and come back to that beautiful mindset so that you can feel good, you can enjoy your own life more for selfish purposes, but you also can bring a lot more joy to others. Let's face it, I talk about in the book the secret of being magnetic. You meet certain people and you're like, wow, person's so magnetic, I just want to be around them. It's not that hard. There's a secret to it, and here it is. It's everybody you come into contact with, you just want to make them feel better and make them feel smarter. Now, making them feel smarter means you have to have something to offer, and you can't give what you don't have. So you have to work into that in advance, right? What we want to make sure that we do is we make the best investment we can. People ask me all the time, I say, Barry, you're involved in the markets, and what do you think about this investment? What do you think about Bitcoin? Where should I invest my money? And what I say to them almost always is the best investment that you can make is right here, is in your brain, is in your mind. And are you feeding that every day? Because some people are, by the way, but they learn to consume instead of what's really interesting is learn to teach others, to help others. When you start learning like that, it makes a big difference. And the best way to learn, obviously, is by teaching as well, because that's when you have to really know your stuff when you're teaching it to others. So to put yourself in that type of position can help make you very magnetic from an educational standpoint. But also, if you if you look at the positives, if you look at the good, if you point out good things, if you begin your relationships not by asking but by offering, then you'll have really strong relationships that are very rewarding. This really all comes back to one of the basic things we all want is we all want to be happy. Right?
Yeah.
Just want to be happy. So one of the great ways to be happy is to make progress towards your goals. You don't necessarily have to reach them, but to make progress, keep striding forward. But the goals that we have, it's really important when we set achievement goals that we keep striving for them because that's critical. And monetary goals. Now, money doesn't answer all of everything, but you can do a lot of good when you start making some money. And it makes your life a lot easier so that you can now focus on things that are bigger and better because that's a basic thing that you don't have to spend as much time stressing over as you and I both had to go through in our childhoods. But even those two things, if you achieve that, a lot of people do and they're still not happy. And I think that's because they're missing the third step, which is fulfillment. And I believe that fulfillment for most of us comes from helping others or doing good, feeling good about what you're doing. So as we move towards our goals that are achievement goals and monetary goals, and there's nothing wrong. Don't be ashamed to say I want to have monetary goals. That's a good goal. As you reach for those forward, you probably also want to be reaching back,
Hmm.
help others. And I think that's what gives you a lot more fulfillment of what you're doing. So you feel better, you feel happier. And that just kind of comes off of you and resonates. And people really gravitate towards that.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I think it is an evolution, similarly how you described it, where, I know when I started out in business, I just wanted to make it through the day. And then I wanted to make it through the week. And then I wanted to make it through the month and then through the year. And then a few years in, I realized, oh my gosh, this could be a career. I can see the future. And I started making progress. And then somewhere in that equation, in that evolution, you start to need help. And you go, okay, if I could bring you in and train you and bring you, and then somewhere right after that, you go, wow, seeing her win or seeing him win, that was more fun than when I got the deal or got the opportunity. And for me, that's been really an absolute blast to watch those people around me. And you talk about fulfillment. When you can build a business or even a team where you can help people get ahead and potentially avoid some of those things that you and I went through as kids, to me, that is the ultimate of fulfillment. That is the happy place that we reground ourselves in. And that is what gives us gratitude and the energy to keep rolling and to keep helping other people.
I completely agree.
So Barry, let's talk a little bit about, in your book, you talk about your mother, and the long hours she was working in the, I think you called it a sweatshop in the book.
Yeah. I've got a picture of one just over my shoulder here, where these women worked in these places where a factory where they make dresses, and it's, I remember it vividly when I was a kid. It's not easy, not a high paying job and a lot of work and difficult conditions. So, yeah.
So the question that I have for you is, how do you think that shaped you and your resolve in, coming from that kind of a reality?
So one of the first lessons, my mom told me about when she learned that she was pregnant, and they were broke. They didn't speak language. My dad was a lot older, especially back then. He was 57, she was 40. So today that's not so crazy, but back then that was considered a little, a little crazy, especially if you're broke and you don't speak the language. And they already had a couple of mouths to feed. So my mom, while she was working at the sweatshop, I guess the emotional, hormones kick in, and she was crying, and her employer came to her, and this woman, Emma, and she said, "Listen, just tell me what's wrong." And my mom explained, we're broke. We don't speak the language. We're older. I don't know what we're going to do. How we're going to make this work. And Emma said that all her life she wanted to have kids, and she couldn't. And if my mom would just give her the baby, she would give my mom whatever she wanted, money, business, whatever, because all she wanted was a baby all her life. And now my mom would never have even considered this, but what it did was it really kind of shook her and changed her mindset. And she realized that this wasn't necessarily a burden, but really a blessing that so many people would have wished for. And this was a blessing that was given to her. So this changed her mindset. And I think a lot of times in life, if we look at things with a little bit of a different lens, we could see that some of the issues or the problems that we have maybe are there for a reason, and that reason could turn out something good. How many times, Josh, or anybody who's listening to this, has been in a situation that you went through something and it was awful? It was a bad breakup in a relationship and you were miserable. You lost a position that you really thought was right for you and you hated losing that, or whatever it was that you went through that you really had a hard time getting through. But then what happened afterwards was you discovered something that was even much better. And you look back and you think about it and you say, boy, as tough as it was to go through it, if I didn't go through that, I would have never discovered this person, this job, this opportunity, this chance. And we realize that while we're going through it, we don't necessarily realize that there's a much bigger picture, because we typically look at things short distance away.
Yep.
It's kind of like driving at night. And when you're driving at night, you really can only see as far as the headlights will shine. But we have to have faith that there's more road ahead. We have to have faith that there's better things down the road, right? And I think life is a lot like that, because as you go through things that are not great or not pleasant or that we wish we weren't going to go through, I think if we have faith that by getting through this, it will ultimately take us to someplace even better, that makes it a lot less difficult to go through those tough times if you continue to be optimistic and believe. And by the way, optimism is a very common trait among successful people. It's extremely important to be optimistic.
Steve Jobs talks about he could never have connected the dots looking forward. The failures led to a different path, which ultimately led to the success. And in Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, one of his chapters is devoted to the fact that the impasse, the challenge, the obstacle is the thing that you need in order to find the correct path, the correct solution, the correct way to your future. And so the more that we can look at those obstacles in a curious fashion, I wonder what that approach is. I wonder what I'm not seeing or what isn't available to me in this moment. And knowing that the obstacle is there, the obstacle actually is the opportunity, because it creates a capacity for you to overcome and to find the future path that you wouldn't have found if the obstacle wasn't there. And it's perspective. It's all perspective. If we're looking at it as a negative, it's a negative. If we look at it as an opportunity that we now get to figure out a solution for, then that's what it is.
I agree with you, although in reality, it's not as easy to do. It's easier to say than it is to do when you tie in the emotions and the feelings and the hurt feelings that while you're going through it. But as much as we can, if we can remind ourselves that let's have faith that this is taking us someplace better eventually. And you draw upon your past experiences where you actually have seen that happen, and it will help assist you to get through those difficult times.
Yeah, well said. Really well said, Barry. So going back, I want to ask just one more question before we kind of pivot into finances. It occurred to me reading your book that you may have never had a W-2 job in your life. I think there was radio sales that then parlayed into mortgage. And I don't know that I ever read about a W-2 portion. So talk to me a little bit about your ability to navigate the self-employed entrepreneurial side of things instead of clinging to the safety of the employee side.
I think part of that goes to believing in yourself and being optimistic, right? So we miss a lot of opportunities because we talk ourselves out of it. Nobody else talks us out of it. We talk ourselves out of it.
Mm.
Too difficult, it's too risky. I'm not saying you do things willy-nilly, okay? I'm not, by no means would encourage somebody to take crazy chances, although I've taken maybe some chances myself, but I think that you should weigh things out and evaluate things. So what holds a lot of people back is fear. And that's the biggest thing that will hold us back. And fear is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. We need a healthy dose of fear to keep us in check so we don't do stupid things. But we shouldn't wait for everything to be perfect. When I first started as a speaker, a woman by the name of Deborah Jones brought me on, and she said something to me that I later understood it better. I didn't really understand it fully when she first told me because I wanted to try and do things with my speaking, but as being as impatient as I was, I wanted to do it, but by the same token, I wanted everything to be perfect before I did something. And she said, Barry, here's the thing. You get better, your tapes don't. Meaning when I would record myself, I'd go back and listen to it, and boy, I'd evolved. But I first had to suck in order to get better.
Yeah.
And I dedicate some time in the book to that as well, where you have to try, you suck, you reflect, get better, and then try again, but this time you'll be better. We evolve because we've gone through not being as good as we could be. So we have to do something and sometimes suck at it so we can get better. So if we wait till we're better, we'll never really get better because we haven't gone through it and learned what we need to learn from not being as good. So don't hold yourself back. What I'm trying to say to you is if there's an opportunity out there, don't wait till you're 100%. Get to where you feel you can kind of be decent at it. Do it, learn by doing it, and then do it again and again and again and again and again and get better every single time. This is really a critical element to evolution and growing because what that builds is confidence. Confidence is what will enable you to be self-employed, to enter business opportunities. So optimism, confidence, not cockiness. We don't want to be cocky, okay? We want to be humble. We want to respect what the obstacles are, respect what other people have gone through. But by the same token, let's not shortchange ourselves. Let's believe in ourselves. Let's say that one of the things that we believe in is our ability to prepare, but also let's believe in our ability to adapt. Let's not put ourselves in a box or a position to say, okay, well, we're going to run into an obstacle and it's over. No, we're going to run into an obstacle, but let's be willing to believe in our ability that when we hit that obstacle, we'll figure out a way, either through our intelligence, experience, or resourcefulness. And like you said, bringing on others, that we'll find a way to get through it. I'm not saying on a wing and a prayer, calculated risks, calculated opportunities, calculated chances that we'll take, but it's not going to be perfect. However, we believe enough in ourselves that we'll get through it in a successful way.
I love that. If we pull nothing out of this interview other than the only way to get better is to throw ourselves into the ring and get some dust and blood on our face, and then to iterate from there and to improve from there. That's a great takeaway, Barry. So let's pivot a little bit. One of the other books that you mentioned in Money in the Streets was Richest Man in Babylon, which was also one of the pivotal financial books, certainly in my life. And what I loved about that book is just how simple, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not that complicated. It's a heck of a lot less complicated than trying to understand stock tickers across the bottom of CNBC when I was 11 or 12 years old, trying to figure out money. So tell us a little bit about Richest Man in Babylon. How did that impact you and shift your perspective on money?
Well, what the principle of the book is to pay yourself first and to not pay everybody else and then you. Treat yourself as if you were the most important bill that's out there. And by doing that and taking 10% of whatever it is that you earn and setting that aside, either saving it or investing it, you then can start to build and create financial wealth. And I mean, I know my son Dan, And him and his twin sister, Nicole, I made sure they read that book when they were very young because I wanted them to understand these. And then my kids, Jake and Jared, they read it when they were very young as well, so that they could understand the concepts that you have to take care of yourself. You know, when you fly in an airplane and after they teach you how to put a seatbelt on, what they'll also say if there's air masks dropped from above, um, what do they tell you to do? They tell you to put your mask on first before helping others. And that's a very important lesson there, because what we have to be able to be is we have to be able to be good ourselves to help someone else. If we're not in a good place, if we're needy, if we don't have our act together, we can't really do good and help others. And remember, that's where a lot of fulfillment comes from, right? So if we want to be happier, yeah, we're going to feel more, we'll do better ourselves by getting ourselves in order, getting our financial house in order, saving a little bit of money, paying ourselves first. And from that, we now can gain fulfillment because we could do good in the world and help others to either learn that or assist them when they're in their time of need, or show opportunities or create opportunities because we have the financial wherewithal to do so much good for others. I mean, think about all the people that we employ because we put ourselves in that position, and the importance that we bring to their families. There's a big responsibilities that we have, and it all starts with us. It all starts with making sure that not just financial, but financial is an important aspect of it, that we're educating ourselves. We're doing the right thing. We're coming from a place of gratitude, and we're being financially responsible so that our house is in order so that we may assist others.
Yeah. I think that Dan and Nicole are of similar age of the vast majority, many of our listeners. They're millennials. I think they're both turning 34, 35, about that age.
Yeah, you're right. Perfect.
And, you know, it occurs to me that generation, between student loans, all of the challenges that they have from a financial aspect, there's a lot of challenges with that generation. So I'm curious, what advice do you have for them besides turning them on to, you know, Richest Man in Babylon? What other advice do you give them, and how do you nurture them from a financial standpoint?
Well, listen, that age group right now, or all age groups are facing the fact that, first of all, life's expensive. Okay, it costs a lot of money for things. And you want to try and have some balance there. You want to have balance because one way to view it is, well, I'm only young once, I want to enjoy it. And that's true. And you shouldn't cheat yourself with that. But then you can't say, I'm not going to worry about the future. So finding balance there is, I think, really important. And that's why the principle of paying yourself first is important. That's why seeing opportunities that you can believe in yourself for, that you can take that move maybe before you're 100% ready so you can advance more rapidly and learn more rapidly. These are all steps that we need to look at in order to secure ourselves both financially and emotionally into the future, because that's a really important age. If you wait before you start doing that, before you know it, the time horizon shrinks. Look, if you start saving money in your teens or 20s, there's a lot less that you have to save, and it's a lot bigger payoff. There's something that some people have heard about called the rule of 72. And it's very interesting. One of the things that I use as an example in the certification for certified mortgage advisor that I created is this following question. If you had your choice and you could take a penny every day and double it for a month, and you can get the results of that, or get $100,000, what would you rather have? And I think that many people listening are saying, okay, Barry, we know you're kind of trying to trick us a little bit here. So it's probably the penny, but the $100,000 seems like a lot. So if you took a penny the next day, it's only worth 2 cents, and 4 cents, 8, 16, 32, 64 cents by the end of the week. Doesn't seem like a lot. You already used up 1 week. But then as you go through the doubling process at the end of 30 days, it might surprise you that it's $5.3 million.
Yeah.
But if the month had 31 days, it would be $10.7 million, a lot more than the 100,000. So what is the point of this? The point is you want that last double.
Yeah.
In order to get the last double, you have to start. So the earlier you start, the more doubles you will get in the accumulation of your wealth. So that's really a key. So if you're in that millennial age, if you're in your late 20s to 30s somethings, it really doesn't matter what age you're at. Today is the youngest you're ever going to be.
Dang it.
So it's important that you begin your journey the earliest you possibly can, but have balance. Don't be miserable while you're doing it. It's like the guy who spends 3 hours a day on the treadmill and says, I'm going to live 10 years longer because of this. I told her, I said, well, yeah, but you spent it on the treadmill. So a little bit of balance, a little bit of balance. Enjoy yourself, but pay yourself first.
I think there's a lot of nuggets in what you just shared. And reflecting back on my early investing days, one of the things I took for granted is how long life and investing is. And that concept of the doubling almost can't be explained. It almost just has to be experienced. But I remember this feeling early when I was looking around the successful people around me, and I thought, man, I got to hit home runs. If I don't hit home runs with my investments, I'm never going to catch her. I'm never going to catch him. And in the rearview mirror, most of those home runs ended up being strikeouts. And if I just would have got on base and realized how long the game is and how the opportunities will come to parlay little successes into big opportunities. If you have those little successes built up, that's a game changer perspective. And I think that's what you just laid out there.
And something you mentioned too, and I know the way you are going through your very successful life in general, is that maybe when we were younger, you look at that, couching them or competing with them in that way. Where I think what we really need to do and really learn, and clearly you've not only learned but mastered this, is we don't want to necessarily compete with them that way and look at them and say, I've got to catch them. We want to go at our own pace to the best that we can do, but we want to learn from them. We want to look at those people that are ahead of us with perhaps, what can I learn from this? And I'm not so worried about catching you because I want to go at my own pace. It's my own life. But how can I take a page from your book and accelerate what I'm doing because of that? So what can I learn from you? And that's why life is always about learning. It's so important that, especially as you're younger, because those lessons that you learn, the more you invest in your brain, the more education that you have on success, the more doubles you'll get because you've learned lessons at an earlier stage that you can then apply. So not just the academic portion, it's academic and application. So you have to do both. You have to learn the lesson and then you have to do it. Might learn great foods to eat could be really healthy, but if I don't do it, the learning didn't really help me, right? So we look, I'm a work in progress. I'm sure most of us are. So we have to realize that we are human and we're certainly not going to be perfect. But if we strive to continuously improve, I think we'll find ourselves on the right path.
Yeah, the enemy of happiness is compare, in my opinion. The more you try to compare and you never see what else is going on in that other person's life, the only thing compare does is rob you of your own personal happiness. But I like that shift that you proposed, which is instead of compare, be curious. Get to know what are the steps, what did that person do, what could I swipe and deploy and model in my own life for success. That's a very subtle shift in perspective, but extremely powerful. So Barry, talk to me about, if we're giving advice to millennials, how do you look at different asset classes? How do you look at where to put your money? And maybe you could take this to how you did it, or maybe you could share with us how you advise your kids.
Well, again, we have to look beyond the headlines. We have to look at what makes sense. I like to invest in things that I understand rather than somebody else tells me to do this and I don't understand it and I don't get it. Like, for example, a lot of people talk to me about the non-fungible tokens or NFTs. And I said, wait a minute, I understand when I have reviewed it and looked at it, I understand what it is, but I don't understand how that could be beneficial or work. I don't get that. And that's why I stayed away from it. And fortunately, that was a smart decision because they have gone through this parabolic rise and then a subsequent drop, a precipitous drop. So that was not something I was interested in. I wasn't going to do it because people say, oh, it's this hottest thing, do it. I need to understand it. And I'm going to do the research. I'm going to see if I understand it. So invest in things you understand. Some of the best investments that I've made were, I like Peter Lynch was one of the greatest investors of all time. He's one of the models that I look at. And I actually mentioned him in the book.
Yeah.
He would go to the shopping malls and he would see where he would only invest in things he understood. So I like to do that. I like to take that type of approach. And even with things that might seem a little bit crazy, like cryptocurrency. And I know some people go nuts for things like, I don't try and do it from a gambling perspective because I might as well just go to a casino, like in Dogecoin. People made so much money. Why did I miss out on it? Because it's okay. I don't understand it because there's just as many people that made money in a casino or lost money in a casino. That's not what I'm in the game for. Now, Bitcoin is something different, in my opinion, because I understand that currencies around the world, they're being debased. If you look at Bitcoin as a competing currency, and maybe it's not the same as those currencies, but it's a store of assets, like putting your money in dollars. And the more of anything that's produced, typically the less valuable it is, right? You get a lot of something out there that dilutes it. And with all of this around the world debasement of currency because of stimulus and things of this nature we're seeing, the value of the paper money, the fiat currency, relative to something that's finite like Bitcoin or presumably finite like gold, seems to me that those things make sense to me as not with every penny I have, but with a portion. Investing is about some diversification. And again, Josh, we don't want to go for the grand slam or the strikeout, right? Because there'll always be stories you can compare to the person who hit the grand slam. And everybody's, I wish that was me. But we forget how many people struck out because they never tell that story. Those are the stories you don't hear. So I don't want to be, I look at it like this. If I can't afford to lose, then I really can't afford to win it, right? So I don't want to strike out or home run. I'd rather hit singles, double here. Maybe I hit a triple or home run on occasion, and maybe I'll strike out on occasion, but I've hit enough singles and doubles that I can withstand the strikeouts and I can really capitalize on those home runs when they happen from time to time. And they will. You're going to put yourself in that position from time to time where it's going to come to you and it's going to happen that way. And you'll also gain the experience and knowledge from being in the game constantly. So as you look at things that you understand as investments, you can better evaluate them. As you put yourself in a position with those investments that, like real estate right now. Now, real estate right now is a little bit hard to get into because there is such a depletion of inventory. Yeah. But I think that over the next 3 or 4 years, that will continue to evolve. I understand that there's too many people and not enough homes. Anything there's too much of and not enough of supply, too much demand, not enough supply, the price will go up. So I understand that. So I like that investment. So that's why I have some real estate. When I look at investments in general that way, that's what I try and evaluate. I try and make it simple.
Yeah, well, that's the playbook out of The Richest Man in Babylon, right? Is one of the tenets is to invest in those things that you know and you understand. And as I think back and look at the things where I tried to hit a home run and swung out at the plate, it was, a currency trade that I really had no clue of the underlying fundamentals and dynamics, but somebody else had crushed it. And so I was going to chase them blindly into that investment. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Over the last 25 years, I've been investing in real estate with my mom. So that the poor kid story has a happy ending, I'm happy to report. And it's been interesting looking back at those investments over that period of time not only to see the appreciation of the properties, but you talked about the long-term doubling of the rents and the cash flow. So my question to you is, what are you currently invested in real estate in terms of rental properties? What's your outlook, which you kind of alluded to? And to dovetail onto that, if this infrastructure bill passes, how do you think that impacts the amount of work available, what the price of commodities and what it costs to create, to build new properties, and what does that do to the future supply chain of properties?
So there's a lot of questions there, but I'll try and take them step by step. So am I invested in real estate? Yes, I have a significant amount of money in real estate, although it's not in rental producing real estate. And there's a specific reason for that is because I've done a lot of that in the past, and that requires some work,
Yes.
and I'm not. I'd rather make a little bit less, but have less heartburn, because that can come with some heartburn as well. And I realize that there is, bandwidth levels that you have, and you know, life isn't about everything; it's about choices, right? Because we can't have everything, but we can try and make choices. So I try and make my choices again in balance of opportunity, but I don't want it to be at the expense of aggravation as much. So I
Right.
try to balance that out. I'm not always successful, but at least I contemplate that. But yes, I am heavily invested in real estate. I like things like stocks that make sense to me. Things in healthcare with an aging population makes sense to me. Biotechnology makes sense to me. Advances in there are coming very, very rapidly. I like genetically modified uh, seed, because I think that we have to feed the world, and there are companies out there. There's one I'm heavily invested in private placement that I could talk about after middle of May, but I can't do it right now. However, in my opinion, it's a wonderful opportunity that could be multifold. Those are the types of things that make sense to me, that I understand, that I make investments in, because I could see that as, if it doesn't make sense to me, I don't want to do it, because then if I lose, then I'm like, well, that was silly of you to do that. At least if it makes sense, I could say, okay, well, fundamentally, it was the right thing. Not everything pans out, but fundamentally, I can justify why I did it, because it makes sense, and maybe there's a blue swan event that caused a change there that nobody could see. So you want to try and play good percentages, is what you want. You're not going to be 100%, but you want to try and increase your chances. Increase your chances by making smart moves. Now, when we came off of that, you talked about this infrastructure plan, and the infrastructure plan, whatever passes, remember, it's going to be over 10 years, so it's not going to be as much money. But then in reviewing the infrastructure plan, not all of it's going to infrastructure.
Right.
And I don't want to get political here. If I were creating an infrastructure plan, I would not be doing it the same way, um, because I'd want it to be infrastructure. And if it's not all going to infrastructure, then it's partial infrastructure, but a lot of other stuff. Then I would probably try and outline what it really is. And I'm not trying to pick on one party, because both parties do this kind of thing, right? But I don't see it making as big a difference, because it's not going to have an immediate impact. And we have to always be careful about arguments that are straw man arguments. The straw man argument is the argument that nobody can argue with, because in fundamental principle, everybody wants it. We need better schools. Yeah, we need better schools. We need better roads. We need better. Yeah, but that's not the end game there. The end game is, how do we get to those better things? What is the cost? What is the application? How are we doing it? Getting that result is a good thing, but how we get there, sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. So we have to be careful of that. What I think we're going to find out more detail on in the very near future is these tax increases. So the tax increases are something that needs to be done carefully. I hate the term when people say fair share, because fair is, when you have fairness is not an easy thing to come up with, right? So we have to be careful about using that. What I think we have to say is, will something like a tax increase when an economy is just trying to recover have some unforeseen or unintended consequences that could be negative. Now, maybe there is a balance with some tax increases, but a the level of tax increase that I'm seeing being proposed, it might be difficult for the economy to digest them. So
Yes.
I think that in Washington, what somebody should really buy everybody in Washington is a Rubik's Cube, because what the concept of individuals in Washington apparently are missing is that you can't make a change and expect everything else to remain the same. If you turn something one way, it will have an impact on other things. And that's why it is very difficult to contemplate all the consequences. But you should contemplate some. And I feel that that's oftentimes missing in policy. I wish that they would try and see a few steps down the road to say, well, we turn this, we expect everything to work out this way. It doesn't always happen that way. We've seen that over and over. It's just that they don't appear to have learned those lessons.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you see the infrastructure bill impacting the price of real estate or the supply and demand imbalances with real estate? Do you see a cause effect
I don't
there?
think I don't think making any change whatsoever. I think there's an imbalance, and I think what Washington is doing now that's really foolhardy is, again, straw man argument. Let's help the first time home buyer. That sounds like a great idea, but the fact of it is we have too many first time home buyers right now and not enough product. So by bringing more first time home buyers in with an additional cash incentive to do so at the closing table of 20,000, or if you're a, a non-white class, 25,000, that just brings more people in. And the problem isn't that we don't have enough people. We have more than enough people. The problem is we don't have enough affordable product to allow
Yeah.
those people to buy.
Yeah.
So they would be exacerbating the problem and just driving the price higher. Why they don't get this concept, I don't understand. What they really should be saying is, hey, builders, we know lumber has gone up 300%. We know that it's gone up 26% in the last month. We understand that regulation is very intense. And we understand that the cost of building is making it so that the margins to build on the lower end are certainly not anywhere near as attractive to build a more expensive home. But we need the supply on the lower end. So if you build at 80% or 75% of the median home price in this marketplace, in this area, in this MSA, in this county, you build at that level, and we'll reward you by alleviating either some of the regulation or some of the lumber expense that you have, and take the same money, but now solve the problem. Don't exacerbate the problem. And by making lower priced homes, well, then a lot of people that you'd like to serve now can come in, and now that wouldn't drive the price up so dramatically. You'd have healthier real estate appreciation at a slower, more affordable pace because you're solving the problem. Just, I mean, it seems simple to me. I wish that they would see you don't pour fire on gasoline to fix a problem. I mean, you don't put gasoline on a fire to fix a problem. I got that. Got that one right, right?
Well, no, you're exactly right. They're trying to pour gasoline on the demand side of the equation, and where the gasoline needs to go is on the supply side of the equation, and help builders produce a product at a lower price. You're absolutely right there. So that brings up the thought process of inflation. And I know you've talked a lot about that, but I would like to hit that one before we wrap. Number one, where do you see inflation going? And number two, how does that impact your investment decisions, specifically for somebody who may have been, once bitten, twice shy, and have a lot of money sitting in a savings account or a CD?
So inflation, in my opinion, is going to go up over the summer months. And much of that is due to the fact that we have a lot of stimulus poured in, which is creating economic activity, which generates inflation. But it's also because of the comparisons to last year. As you start to remove, April and May of 2020 and replace it with April and May figures of 2021, the inflation rate goes from currently the core CPI has gone from 1.3 to 1.6%. higher, but not dramatically so, to over the summer, I think it heats up to 2.5%. That's a pretty big move.
Big
So
move.
that's going to drive interest rates up a little bit over the summer. But we see that slowing down. And as the year-over-year comparisons level off, that's one aspect. But the stimulus is ephemeral. And Josh, what I mean by this is that it creates some activity, but then it wears off. Here's what happens. If you take a look at the CARES Act of 2020, between March and April of 2020, there were two versions of it totaling $2.8 trillion. There's 2.3 and then a half trillion, so $2.8 trillion. An enormous sum of money. Do you know that by October, it had pretty much worn off? Created all this activity, and then it wore off. Now, when we think about that, that's a lot of money. The GDP for the year 2020 was 4.3%, but in the fourth quarter, it was a meager 0.4%. So the other three quarters had 3.9% and then 0.4% because it had already worn off. Now, the same amount, an enormous 2.8 trillion, when you total up what happened in December of 2020 and March of 2021, 900 billion, 1.9 trillion is also happens to be $2.8 trillion. Again, this enormous sum of money. If the playbook's the same towards the end of this year, we should start to see the effects of this wear off, which leads me to believe that we will see inflation slow down. The other thing people say is, okay, so we're getting vaccinated, the masks will come off, that's going to create inflation. It's the exact opposite. See why people don't understand this, because we all have day-to-day versions of this. Go and try and find an Uber today.
Right.
Why does it take longer and why does it cost more? Uber just raised their prices. That's why I'm bringing this up. Because they can't get drivers. Why? Because the average amount that somebody is receiving is $18 an hour to stay home between the increase in unemployment benefits and the stimulus that's out. So why would I go back to work? I don't blame anybody for that. Why would they go back to work? I can make more sitting at home rather than working. So I don't have to worry about childcare. I don't have to worry about dry cleaning. I don't have to worry about expenses. And it's perhaps for many people feel it's nicer to be at home too, right? I mean, so don't blame anybody, but people will do what you incent them to do and what you will subsidize.
That's right.
Now, when that wears off, many people will come back to work. That alleviates the supply chain. That makes it easier to produce stuff. That brings prices down. That brings inflation down. When inflation comes down, interest rates come down. But the bottom line that I see is I see a recession coming in 2022, maybe 2023. It's hard to get the timing. And that means an opportunity for much lower rates at that point in time. So these are economic events that we should watch out for. And the stock market, so you said, what do you invest in was the last thing that you said, right? So the stock market could go higher from here, certainly, but it is the most expensive stock market we've ever had. And because of that, I just want people to be careful. I just want you to be careful. This is a marketplace where, the stock market is said to be able to cause the most harm to the most people at the worst time.
That's right.
And if the economy starts to slow down, the stock market will probably start to reveal the fact that it is at levels that are expensive levels. And a lot of this is being propped up with stimulus. Here's a fact. 37% of the stimulus money went into savings and investing. Look at the popularity of Robinhood. Robinhood would not be this crazy popular without the stimulus checks fueling a lot of it, right? So a lot of this has gone into the marketplace and it'll push it higher. You used to have to buy stocks in lots, meaning you had to buy 100 shares. That was called a lot. And then eventually, over time, that broke to where you could buy single shares. But things like Robinhood allow you to buy fractional shares. So if you wanted to buy, before you could buy one share of Apple for $300, and then the cost involved would make it almost prohibitive to do so. But now you could buy $100 worth of Apple. You could buy $10 worth of Apple because you could do fractional shares. And because of that, you have so many more people now that can feel this that wouldn't be in the game before. And a lot of this is coming from that. And you're seeing a lot of this rise in the marketplace. But at these levels, it wouldn't take too much, for the market to stop going up. All it takes is a bit of an absence of buyers, and the market will come down. So just be careful. That's all. If you have a long time horizon, it's okay. Be selective. I wouldn't chase the super high flyers. I would try and find things that you can understand that would be that have real earnings that in a more difficult times can do well. Now, if you want to have a portion of your portfolio for some really exciting or riskier stuff, sure, but partition it. Partition. Say, okay, look, I want to have, maybe between gold and Bitcoin, I'll put 3% of my assets, or 4%, or even 5% of my assets that are investable there. Maybe I'll put 5 or 10% in stuff that's, a little bit riskier and exciting, and where I have a chance of really seeing some big returns, but there also has more risk. But the bulk of your assets should be in stuff that slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, really well said, Barry. Well, in our closing moments here, first of all, I just want to, it occurs to me that we are in an everything asset bubble, whether it's real estate or cryptos, or, well, maybe not today on cryptos, but generally speaking in cryptos and stocks. And so it's probably a time for people to be more attuned to what's going on in the economy and the shift that may be coming with that upcoming recession. So just in closing, Barry, where would you suggest our listeners go to read, listen, and study and be aware of what's really happening in the economy to have as much forecast of what's going to happen ahead as possible?
Well, we try and do a good job of that every day at MBS Highway. We also have a really good educational course called the Certified Mortgage Advisor, which gives you everything from technical analysis to reading the charts to making better entry and exit decisions on any security, whether it's a stock. So we think we do a good job there. But if you'd like to subscribe to my friend John Malden's Thoughts from the Frontline, that's a good place to begin. John's brilliant. He'll give you a lot of reasons to think. He's also a brilliant writer. So I'd read that. And there's so much that you could read. I would really make sure that you spend a lot of time reading and feeding your brain, and do it in areas that you're interested in, because that'll be easier. It'll be more exciting for you. It'll be more fun. It'll make more sense to you. So whatever you do it well. Whatever you want to invest in, learn about it and become more educated. Try and gain mastery in those areas. And the interesting thing is, the more you learn about something, the more you realize that there's a lot more to know, because you realize all the things you don't know, which kind of makes it interesting and fun and humbling. But it will give you advantages, and it will pay off for you. So feed your brain. That's the investment you need.
Sorry, say that last piece one more time, Barry.
Feed your brain. That's the most important investment you need to make.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Barry, thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure. Where can people get your book, and where can they connect with you and find you?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Audible. I actually read it on Audible. So there's probably professional readers who could have done a little bit more professional job of reading it, but I think you'll like it in my voice. It's kind of like home cooking, It's like that home cooked meal. Maybe it's a little burnt around the edges, but
it's got flavor, baby.
Flavor,
it's authentic.
It's authentic. Yeah. Yeah, but it's a book I think you'll enjoy. And MBS Highway is a place you could find me as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the book, whether you're an investor in the mortgage industry, not, if you love a great story and a great triumph, that's the book for you, and it's loaded with advice. So I recommend everybody pick it up. Barry Habib, thank you so much, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks for listening to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify to be notified of all future episodes, and follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Neo Home Loans and how we empower homebuyers with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom, visit neohomeloans.com.